I'm Cynthia James, and this network is about changing lives one woman at a time. Welcome to Women Awakening. I'm your host, Cynthia James. I am so honored to be with you and to introduce you to women that inspire me. They inspire me because they're way showers. They're people who have stepped into their field of destiny and purpose and are making a difference on this planet. And what I want you to know is they're not exceptions. They're just opportunities for us to see what's possible, that we can step into a space where we get to share our gifts, our light, because this is the time for women emerging on the planet. The world needs our love and our harmony and our grace and our peace. So I love that I get to do this every week. We're on all the platforms: Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, Spreaker, Amazon, YouTube video. Just look for Women Awakening with Cynthia James. Subscribe, share the videos, invite all of your women friends, because together we're going to change this world. We're going to step into a space of transformation. So I am so excited to introduce you to my guest today. Her name is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati. She is a renowned spiritual leader, an author, and a motivational speaker based in Rishikesh, India. She's the author of the newly released #1 best-selling memoir, Hollywood to Himalayas, A Journey of Healing and Transformation. She is the Secretary General of the Global Interfaith WASH Alliance, dedicated to clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. She's president of Divine Shakti Foundation, which runs free schools, vocational training programs, and empowerment programs for women and children. She's also the co-president of Religions for Peace and director of the world-famous International Yoga Festival, which has been covered in Time, CNN, and the New York Times. Sadhvi, thank you so much for being here.
Cynthia, it's so beautiful to be with you and with all of your beautiful community.
Well, I want to start with how you grew up, because I'm sure you didn't grow up knowing that you were going to be this great spiritual leader and do all this work in the world. How did you grow up, and where did you grow up?
Absolutely, and you're right. I had no idea. Not only did I have no idea, but it wasn't even part of my life plan or goal, which is why I always say, just allow grace, because the universe has such better plans for you than you ever could imagine. I grew up quite literally in Hollywood and had really the very best that in the West we are taught one should have. So a wonderful education. I ended up going to Stanford University and graduated from there, and then was getting my PhD. I grew up with a lot of prosperity, opportunity, privilege on really every level, a financial level, a social level, on every level. And yet, we weren't really happy. I mean, I certainly wasn't, and most people I know were not. And what I realize is, for me, there were two kind of distinct streams of reasons why I wasn't. The first being just the general truth that we now know, which is, hey, guess what? Money doesn't buy happiness. And guess what? Just because you've got all of this opportunity and all of this privilege and all of this prosperity, that doesn't actually equal happiness. Whereas we're told so much in the West that it really is about that. So one reason I think I was not so happy is just the fact that we were looking literally for happiness in the wrong places. The other reason, though, was much more personal, which was that I had experienced, in addition to all of the incredible blessings, I had experienced really severe trauma in my early life. I had been sexually abused as a very young child and then abandoned by my biological father. And the ripple impact repercussions of that emotionally, psychologically, ended up with me becoming severely bulimic in my adolescence. And I was in and out of hospitals, literally, at death's door. I've never done anything half-heartedly. So whether I'm going to study, I'm going to excel. And if I'm going to kill myself with an eating disorder, I'm going to excel at that. So I literally wound up in hospitals and was in really quite bad shape. By the time I came to India at the age of 25, I had really learned to manage my life. I had been in treatment and somewhat recovery from the eating disorder for several years. I had been doing lots and lots and lots of psychological work. I was getting a PhD in psychology. I was doing very well, getting straight A's, managing my life, managing my school. I was married. I was managing my relationships, managing my emotions. And I really thought that that was the highest goal. That basically everybody I knew was either managing their lives well or managing their lives not well. But I thought that that was actually ultimately the goal, was just to learn how to manage your life well. So by 25, that was where I was. And I felt like, yeah, I've got this managing thing down. I'm managing everything. And it never occurred to me that actually there was another higher goal and opportunity called freedom, of actually being free from the habits, the patterns, the thoughts, the narratives, all of that operates on chemical and electrical levels, that operate on other energetic levels, that operate on so many levels, that we actually can be free of the ways that we think, the ways that we live, the ways that we act, the ways that we understand ourselves, the way that we understand the universe. And so I come to India with a backpack at 25 on what I thought was a brief break from my PhD program. And I don't even, Cynthia, I don't even get credit for wanting to come to India because I was on some kind of a spiritual quest. I was not. I didn't even realize that spirituality was something that one really might want to search for in a way that it would benefit all of us and that it was available to all of us. I agreed to come to India. My husband wanted to come. He was on a spiritual path. And interestingly, due to him being on the path, I felt even more like I was somehow disqualified. I didn't have the qualities that he had that made him eligible for a path. I wasn't interested in the things that he was interested in that seemed to be prerequisites for the path. And yet I wanted to make him happy, so I agreed to come. I also...
Wait, before you go any further, because I want to interrupt you, because there's a couple things I want to say.
Of course, yes.
Then I want to know the rest of the story. But
yes.
Here's the thing I want to say, because I had a violent childhood. There was abuse. And so many people that I have met and that I've interviewed have had those kinds of traumatic things in their childhood. And that word, manage your life, is something that so many of us have had to navigate to find our way to center. And so, as a part of managing your life, was the relationship with your husband part of that? And so, of course, you would say yes to going to India, even though you weren't traveling the same path?
Absolutely. Great question. And yeah, it's important actually to stop here for a moment, because certainly managing your life is much better than not managing your life. And certainly on the path to freedom, one has to walk through the ability to manage your life. Otherwise, you end up in spiritual bypasses and all kinds of other situations that are not the freedom that we're ultimately looking for. For me, with my husband, yeah, I had, as you can imagine, severe abandonment issues, having been abandoned at the age of 8 by my biological father. And the idea of not going with him would never have occurred to me. The idea of holding on to the relationship was of critical importance to me. And I wasn't against India. I just wasn't really interested in it. I had spent a lot of time traveling throughout Europe, across the US, and there just wasn't anything that I knew about India at that point that enticed me, other than the fact that I was a very strict vegetarian. And traveling in Europe and England, even across America 30, 35 years ago, was really, really difficult, especially if you don't speak the language, and especially if you are really strict about it. Like if chicken broth in your vegetable soup is something that is not acceptable, it's challenging even today. And at that time, it was super challenging. So what I had learned was, no matter where I was in the world, Indian restaurants were always the safe places to get pure vegetarian food. And I knew that I loved Indian food. I knew that they would never stick fish or eggs or chicken bouillon cubes into something that I wasn't going to be surprised to discover what was in my meal. So yeah, those were really the two motivating factors to come.
Okay, so you get there, and I want to know what was a pivotal moment because something happened
Yes.
that had you make a life-changing decision.
So this was 1996. It was September of 1996. And there was no Google at that time. We had internet, meaning we had, AOL mail, but the internet was much more of a toy than anything that those of us who were not computer techs were able to benefit from. So we didn't have Google, but we had a big, thick, Lonely Planet guidebook. And I opened it in Delhi, literally in a restaurant sitting in Delhi where I was quite happy that I had finally found a cup of proper coffee and discovered Rishikesh. I had been in final exams leading right up to the trip. And we figured we'll just get there. We'll go to Delhi. We'll figure it out from there. So I opened this guidebook and say, Rishikesh. It was literally like that. It sounded beautiful, mountains, river. I've always been a nature person. My happy place, my spiritual place for the first 25 years of my life, when I would have said I was not a spiritual person, my spiritual place was in the woods, in the forest, in the mountains, hugging trees, lying in the dirt. I mean, it was spiritually ecstatic at a time when I never would have used those words. But in retrospect, that's exactly the experiences that I was having. So mountains, river, it sounded great. It's, the yoga capital of the world, full of yoga centers. We were both already yoga students. And so the idea of being in a place that was beautiful with a mountain and rivers and yoga sounded just perfect. And of course, it was not too far from Delhi, so it wasn't like our first place was going to be the other end of the country. Easy to get to. So we come. Oh, and before we come, I'm looking at the Lonely Planet guide for hotels. And Rishikesh is an official holy city of India, meaning that things like alcohol are not allowed, meat is not allowed. So the descriptions of the hotels were all really almost identical. Singles, doubles, AC, non-AC, vegetarian restaurant, like they all sounded essentially the same. But one hotel was called the Green Hotel. And I was an avid environmentalist. I had organized the very first Earth Day celebration at Stanford when I was still an undergrad there. And so, in a list of seemingly identical hotels to stay in, I thought, oh, it's going to be like an eco-friendly, eco-resort type of place. Turns out they actually just painted the walls this like pastel green color. But that's what drove us to where we were. But this is where I circle back to grace, because now there's tons of hotels right around the ashram I live in called Parmarth Nikatan. But at that time, this area where we are was only ashrams. All of the other hotels, tourist areas were all farther north in Rishikesh. And the Green Hotel was the only hotel in this area that's called Swarg Ashram, which means heavenly abode. And I didn't know that at the time, but yes. And so the fact that I was led to that hotel was just yet another way of the universe sending me exactly where I needed to be. So, Green Hotel, we get to Rishikesh, get to the hotel, put down our bags, and I say, I'm going to go put my feet in the river. I was hot, I was tired. We had driven up, we had schlepped our bags across the bridge because nobody had told us that there were coolies or even a boat. And so I was really tired and wanted to just go and be not amongst people, but just on the banks of the river. And I didn't even know the river was holy. Right. Cynthia, this river, the Ganga River, the Ganges River, is not just the lifeline of India from the perspective of water and food, but it is actually the lifeline of people's faith, of their connection. She is seen as the mother goddess, the bestower of liberation. I had no idea. I go down to this river thinking it's just going to be like any other river. I'm going to put my feet in, I'll feel fresh and better. And I go and I stand on the banks of this river. And suddenly, it was like a veil was ripped off of my eyes and off of every way of knowing that I had, ripped off of my mind, ripped off of my psyche, ripped off of every aspect of me. And suddenly, I literally was in the presence, not just theoretically that, yes, we're all in the presence of God, but literally, experientially in the presence of the divine that pervaded everything. It began with the river, but no matter what I turned my head to look at, a child, a tree, a telephone pole, some marble steps, it didn't matter. Everything was God. And so was I. That pervading of all of the divine in that moment was, oh my God, everything is God and so am I. And I, who had always felt like there was something wrong with me, even when I had gotten to the stage of managing my life, there's an internal sense of, if I let go of the death grip that I've got over myself, over my mind, over my emotions, over my food, over my relationships, I will fall apart. I will come apart into pieces. There is something inherently wrong with who I am. And suddenly in that moment, it was this experience, this knowing of, you are divine. You are not separate from this presence that is everything. And it was the most extraordinary, transformative moment of my life. It literally knocked me to the ground, sobbing in tears. And that was when I knew this is where I am meant to be. How, where, doing what, like none of the logistics were worked out, obviously, but they were so irrelevant at the moment. It just didn't matter. I was rendered pretty nonverbal for many days. All I could say for a really long time was just, oh my God, it's so beautiful. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. And yeah, that was the beginning of really what my life was going to become. And it's now been 28 years. I celebrated my anniversary with Ganga of 28 years back in September. And it's just been an ever growing, ever expanding blessing.
Well, first of all, I love this story. It's such an incredible description of oneness and all that is holy and all that we are. And that you got called there because it was a calling of some kind.
Yes.
And that you could put your feet in that water and instantly present. Okay, so I want to know because as I was reading your bio, there's all these things that you're doing, but I gotta ask, what was your husband's response to the fact that you have now stepped into the field of oneness?
It was unfortunately not what I had hoped. I was really hoping when I finally, several days later found Parmarth Nikatan, where I live, and found my guru, His Holiness Swami Chidananda Saraswatiji, one of the most revered and beloved spiritual masters, not only in India, but across the world. I really actually had hoped that my husband was going to be super happy and feel like, oh, this is great. You found the ashram, you found the guru. This is what he was looking for. Unfortunately, the dynamics of our relationship and also his life dharma and my dharma and each of our divine flows were actually not meant to align in that way. And he didn't respond well. We did end up separating, but it was so clearly right for him as well. He's married to a beautiful, wonderful woman. They have two beautiful children. He's doing fantastically well. So it was obviously challenging at the time, but it has turned out to be something that just was clearly the right path for both of us.
Yeah. Well, first of all, bravo for listening to the divine that was gently moving you. But I want to know now, because this is a complete lifestyle change that you are embarking on. Moving into an ashram, having a guru, you know, um, opening to things you had not imagined before. So I want to ask you, what do you think is the biggest gift that was given to you that you now spread across the planet?
The gift that was given to me, I mean, there were so many, but if I had to, because I don't want to just choose one, so I'm thinking how to combine them. I think it is the gift of knowing that no matter what has happened to you, no matter the size, the shape, the color of your body, no matter what it has done or what has been done to it, no matter what it has, no matter what it can do, no matter what it has been through, that we are divine, that we are whole, we are full, we are perfect. And we are not the bodies.
Yes.
We have bodies, and the bodies are these extraordinarily beautiful gifts from the divine to fulfill our karmic journey, but that we are not the body, that we are soul, we are spirit, we are consciousness, we are love. And I had always identified so much as the story of I am a victim of or a survivor of. I mean, it's an improvement in semantics, of course, but either way, you are identified with the story. Victim of abuse, victim of abandonment, survivor of abuse, survivor of abandonment. Either way, that's the story, and that's the identity. And the gift was the awareness that, yes, that happened. No, it shouldn't have happened. And that isn't you.
Right.
Who you are was never touched, never tainted, never harmed, never abused. Who you are is the pure light of consciousness, of divinity. And yeah, we work through our human karmic journeys, because if we don't, then we can't actually experience spiritual truth. And because, the human journey is also really beautiful. I mean, I love, I love the human journey. I love the human psyche. I love going deep within myself, even on an emotional, psychological level. So it's not one instead of the other, but it's this awareness that you are not damaged goods in some way, that you're not less than someone in any way, that you are not, that your worthiness of occupying your place on planet Earth has nothing to do with anything around your color, your size, your shape, your race, your religion, your story, where you've been, who you've been there with, anything regarding the body. That is not who you are. And that combined with, therefore, the need to let go in forgiveness to all of that that has been done, that has caused pain, to the universe for unfulfilled expectations, or whatever it may be that we're holding on to, the awareness that actually our death grip on these stories, on these narratives, on these identities, on these grudges is actually that which is keeping us from living in freedom. Right. And, not long after I had met my guru, I mean, literally within the first couple of days, he sent me down to Ganga, back to this river of liberation, and said, give your pain to the river, give it to her, give her your anger, give her your pain, and let it go.
Yes.
And I, of course, thought, in my Western educated arrogance, I thought, oh, how quaint. how cute that one could even imagine that you could give something like this to a river and that the river would take it. And yet, fortunately, by grace, my commitment to having an open heart and my commitment to sincerity, even though I was sure it wasn't going to work, led me to do what he said with the sincerity, with the surrender, with the open heart that actually enabled it to happen. And not only did it happen in my life, but I've seen it happen in so many people's lives. And so I think that gift really is the gift. It's a two-part gift. A, the awareness that you are not damaged goods, that you are pure, that you are divine, that you are whole, that you lack nothing, that you are the embodiment of the divine. And then the second piece, that which is keeping you from living that, knowing that, experiencing that, is actually existing in your own mind, and you can be free of it and you can let it go, if you are prepared to.
Yes. Okay, ladies, in case you didn't get all of that, rewind and listen again. So is this why you wrote this book? I mean, because you've done a lot of things where you are, where you're living. Why this book now?
Okay, so in the last 28 years, I have been dedicated to something we call seva. And seva is spiritual service, but it is not merely something like volunteer work. It's actually a spiritual practice of giving of the self in spiritual offering to others. And so seva can be, in a lot of ashrams, the seva that they have is, clean the toilet, sweep the floor, chop the vegetables, et cetera, et cetera. Here, we give people seva that tends to be much more in alignment with actually their skills and abilities. But it's a spiritual practice of offering of the self to the creation, to the universe, the awareness that who I am, what I have has been given to me to be a channel for healing for the world, and whatever it is. And so for me, over these last 28 years, the seva began for the first, 10, 15 years. It was just essentially whatever needed to be done in whatever my guru gave me to do. I began doing, his correspondence for a long time. For the first couple of years, I was just managing his correspondence. Then I started getting more and more involved in the charitable projects that we were running, and those projects started expanding. So for many years, I was really singularly focused on the work of building schools and providing free education to children, empowerment and upliftment to women. We run free programs for women, giving them skill training, life skills, and all of that sort of empowerment, and teaching the kids a full, proper education, but also, an empowerment education, the value-based education. And we then started a foundation, you mentioned WASH Alliance, that we founded back in 2013, of uniting religious leaders and religious communities across all of the different religions to work together for water, sanitation, and hygiene. In India at that time, 1,500 children were dying every single day. Children under the age of 5 were dying every day simply due to open defecation, simply due to the fact that they weren't using toilets. So we formed this big foundation dedicated to clean water, to making sure that people have access to water, that they have access to sanitation, hygiene. It expanded into working for menstrual hygiene, because in India, a tragically large percentage of girls only find out about menstruation when they actually start menstruating. And what that means is they end up staying home from school. The schools don't have toilets, or the toilets don't have doors, or the girls don't have access to the menstrual supplies that would enable them to leave the home and actually go to school. So we started doing a lot of work around that. So yes, I've been very beautifully and very gratefully filled with lots and lots of opportunities to serve. And what happened was, one of the ways that I started serving, going back about 15 years or so, was doing a lot of spiritual teaching. And I lead, in addition to, different lecture programs and whatnot all over the world, I lead every night here in the ashram something called satsang, which is a spiritual question and answer session. It's not a lecture. I don't go in with a topic. people come in, we meditate together, and they ask whatever questions arise in their mind, and the answers flow through me, not from me, but through me. And I started noticing something happening in satsang, which was people started to, well, in general, I noticed that people were starting to really put me on a pedestal. India is amazing at the whole, like, we are nothing, you are everything, just bless us kind of devotion. And it's not self-deprecation in any way. It's just this beautiful devotion of a culture and people who have such faith and love and surrender in the divine and all of the divine manifestations. So I started being really put up on pedestals, you know, the crowds coming and touching your feet and bowing and whatnot. And I was always acutely aware of the fact that it wasn't about me. And so it never, thankfully, by God's grace, it never became an ego problem for me, because I really just started bowing back to them, like, you know, what beautiful devotion that you have and surrender that you have and humility that you have. But something else started happening along with that, which was people started saying things in the satsang or otherwise, like, well, I know you're too pure to think like this, but, or I know you would never struggle with something like this, but. And I realized that people had this vision of me as this kind of, you know, Stanford angel, virgin angel who descended from like the Stanford clouds onto Rishikesh. And that they really felt that I was somehow qualitatively different, cut from a different cloth. And I realized it was so important for people to realize that that wasn't true, because the stories that we hear, I think in religion in general, but particularly in India, are stories of men who basically come out of the womb enlightened. You know, if you look at the gurus and the masters, most of them are men, and almost all of their stories are basically came into the world like this. They were not interested in school or sports or games or girls or anything. They wanted to meditate, and they, you know, and my guru was like that. He left his home at the age of 8 with his guru and spent his childhood meditating, standing on one foot for 11 hours a day in the Himalayas. So we have those beautiful examples and embodiments, but they're not, excuse me, they're not things that make people feel like, oh, I can do that. Yes. And I realized that I had been given an experience, a set of experiences that enabled me to really understand people's struggles, and that if people knew about this set of experiences, they would stop saying things like, oh, well, you know, maybe next life I will be blessed enough to be as pure as you are, and then I too will be able to have a spiritual experience. And they would start realizing that actually they can have it right here, right now, that I'm not cut from a different cloth. I'm not different than they are. I did not descend as a virginal angel from Stanford clouds onto Rishikesh, but actually, I really know pain and struggle and conflict and anger and longing and jealousy and addiction and depression and all of that. And I know freedom. And if I can, so can they. And I realized, therefore, that I needed to tell a much bigger, deeper story than the 18 minutes of my TED Talk. Because people had been saying, as you can imagine, since I came, oh my God, you should write your book. Oh my God, you should write your book. Oh my God, you should tell your story. But I shared about the seva part because my life is dedicated to service. And writing a book is a massive undertaking, as you know. And it is not like, oh, I'll just do this on Saturday morning and then I'll get back to, working for the schools. It's hundreds and hundreds of hours. And I then did a TED Talk. And so I felt like, okay, I've done it. Like, people hear the elevator version. I share it with whoever asks. I now have done 18 full minutes of my story. And yet what I realized was none of those versions had the full truth, because you can't do that, or at least I couldn't do that in 18 minutes. No. And it wasn't the story that I was telling. Should anybody ever ask, should it ever arise, I certainly would share it, but I never had shared it publicly. And I just really wanted people to understand that being spiritual doesn't mean you can't be human, that you don't have to forsake your humanity in order to be spiritual, and that no matter how mired in your human karmic journey you may be, grace is there for you. Freedom is available for you. Spirituality is there. So that's why I wrote Hollywood to the Himalayas, which was my memoir that, as you mentioned, yes, by God's grace, was a #1 bestseller. And it's been so beautiful to share that with people all over the world. And it has really opened up conversations in such an exquisite and powerful way that I'm really grateful for, because now people also feel open to ask questions on even deeper levels, knowing that I'll go there, that I'll talk about anything. My new book that is coming out now is called Come Home to Yourself. And it is a book actually of questions and answers from the evening satsangs. It is transcribed answers to the questions. And it's been such a joy to do, because now that I've been doing satsang for the last 15 plus-ish years, I've had the joy of having so many people come back physically to the ashram over and over again, or sending letters, sending notes on social media, whatever it is, talking about how a specific answer was exactly what they needed, exactly when they needed it, and just the gratitude that people have had for the power of the answers. And as I said, I'm really aware that they are coming through me, not from me. It's not about an answer I know, but it's about me opening myself up as a channel to that which needs to be spoken. And so the book literally covers topics ranging from things like, what is consciousness and how do I experience it, to how do I deal with my mother-in-law, to what happens to the soul after death, to how do I manage my anger or my addiction or my kids or my spouse, or to how do I meditate, to why do we meditate. So it's this huge spectrum of really every aspect of the spiritual being in human bodies existence that we all have. And I'm so excited to share this with people who aren't able to come and be here in Rishikesh, and people who aren't necessarily tuning in every single night to it live on YouTube, to be able to actually have answers to questions that I have been so blessed to be given these life lessons and to be able to share them. So yeah, it's an incredible gift. rooted in the awareness, as the title says, come home to yourself. That
Right.
it's not about getting another degree or certification or this or that or learning this or learning that or achieving this or mastering that. It's about letting go of the layers of ignorance that we live in and dropping deeply into the very, very truth of who we are.
It's so beautiful. All right, I want you to tell people how to get this book. How do they order Come Home to Yourself?
Wonderful. Well, fortunately, the gift of technology has made things so easy. Both Hollywood to the Himalayas and Come Home to Yourself are available on Amazon. Come Home to Yourself is in pre-order, so go ahead, order it now, and you'll get it as soon as it actually launches. Hollywood to the Himalayas is, of course, already there, so you can have that at your doorstep right away. And in bookstores, Hollywood to the Himalayas, of course, is there. Come Home to Yourself will be there on April 15th, as soon as it's actually out in stores. But again, you can get it on Amazon right now. So I would just love everyone to get these and to really be able to share in the truth and the power of the lessons of this incredibly sacred land in the Himalayas that I have been so blessed to be in, and a wisdom tradition that really guides us and shows us not just how to manage our lives, but actually how to be free of all of that which causes suffering.
Well, it's so beautiful. I am so grateful that you're here, that you've written these books, and that you are in such high service. So the name of this show is Women Awakening. What do you think is the most important thing about women awakening on the planet in this moment?
We need our women to be awake. In the Sanskrit language, it has, and the Hindi language, it has masculine and feminine nouns the way that, French and Spanish and so many other languages do, but unlike English. And the word for creation is shrishti, feminine. The word for nature is prakriti, feminine. The word for the power through which creation is created, through which all of the work of creation, sustenance, dissolution is done, is called Shakti, feminine. So literally, the energy of the creation, the energy of that which sustains the creation, the energy of that which transforms the creation at the end of its cycle into something new, that energy and all of that which is created along the way, all of it is feminine. So the power of the feminine cannot be overstated. And we need it on so many levels today, because that feminine principle, and I say that rather than women, because there are many men who embody that very beautifully. And there's many women who tragically are under the illusion that in order to be successful, they need to be more like men. And so I speak much more about the feminine principle, but it's so critically important, because what we need in our world is compassion. We need nurturance. We need nourishing. We need sharing. We need caring. We need patience. We need oneness and togetherness. The separation, the competition, the violence against ourselves, against each other, against Mother Earth is destroying us. first in our own hearts, and then in our families, and then in our communities, and then in our nations, and ultimately with the planet. And I really think it is coming back to this feminine principle and awakening that, not only in women, but actually in all, so that we can touch that which enables us to heal, to unite, to connect, to nurture, to nourish, rather than that which drives us to compete, to be separate, to grab and hoard more in a protective mechanism. You know, there's nothing wrong with the masculine energy. It's beautiful. The masculine principle is so critical in its own way, but it's much more focused on that, you know, separation and competition and the grabbing and the hoarding because, hey, I've got to take care of myself and my family, and who knows if it's going to be a lean winter. So it's much more of an energy of that. And we need the feminine energy right now. And we need our women to awaken into that and to realize that we are all divine. As I said, women so much, men too, but women particularly, I think, really define ourselves so much by our bodies, by how they look, by what they can do, by the approval that they get, by what's happened to them. And to really realize we are not that we are perfect, we are divine, we are consciousness, we are whole and infinite. And to awaken into that so that we can share that energy with the world.
So beautifully said. Well,
And to
Sadhvi,
stop, lastly, Cynthia, I mean, I know it goes without saying, but it's so important just to emphasize every chance I get to stop letting ourselves be slaves to algorithms, slaves to somebody else's business plan that is all based on making us feel that we are lacking in what we look like, in what we own, in the car we drive, in where we vacation. And that if we just buy their product, whether it's a cream for our skin, whether it's a purse, whether it's shoes, whether it's a car, whatever it may be, then we will be worthy of occupying our place on planet Earth. And we just need to come together and say no more. I will no longer allow my energy, my heart, my mind, my pocketbook to be hijacked by people who have no interest in my well-being and only an interest in making money off of my vulnerability and my insecurity.
all right, ladies, I hope you were taking notes because there was a lot of wisdom imparted there. Sadhvi, thank you so much for being here. I feel so honored to share this time with you and to have your wisdom and to come home to yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. It's been such a joy to be with you and to be with your community and to be together today. It's been such a joy, such a gift, such a blessing. And I hope that someday I'm able to welcome you here to Rishikesh, to Paramarthanikadhan, and all of your community here.
Thank you. All right, ladies. I close this show the same way every week with different words. But I just want to reiterate to you, you are spectacular. You are a divine being, a manifestation, a divine spark that is put here for a reason in this moment to bring your light, your gifts, your talents, your power. And so make no mistake, you never have to give yourself away to anyone because God has you. I'm so grateful to be here with you every week. Please take good care of you, shine your light because your presence matters. Thank you and much love and many blessings. I'll see you next time.